Hi folks, in this video we're going to be tackling the question, is consciousness a function of the human mind or an aspect of universal mind? This question is not only being tackled by me but by several other video makers, and although you may be watching this on YouTube, it is also appearing on a forum called The Dark Wheel, which you can find at thedarkwheel.wordpress.com, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other video makers make on this question. So anyway, I'll give my opinion, and it really is just an opinion because consciousness itself, it's a very hard topic to say anything definitive about because we don't know what it is. We don't know what consciousness is. Sometimes when I'm on forums listening to particularly materialistically minded scientific people, when they comment, they try to give you an appearance that they know what it is, and in one paragraph they'll write something about brain function and maybe make some kind of a comparison to the computer, and they'll act like that's it all sewn up, we know what consciousness is, but it's really not that simple, and the real thinkers in science know that it's not that simple, and they actually have a name for this problem, and they call it the hard problem. What is subjective experience? What is consciousness? We don't know. You see, you can describe it in terms of the physical brain. You can talk about how chemicals affect the brain and what they do, but there remains this mysterious you doing the experiencing. And what is that? Because we know that when we build something like a computer, there isn't anything there. It's just blind electricity flowing through logic gates, giving you a sort of facsimile of consciousness. But in here, there is an actual observer or experiencer that is deeply mysterious. So I know the only way I'm going to be able to talk about consciousness is in an abstract way. Because what I find is that if I attempt to explain it the normal way, by looking at all the parts and seeing how they fit together, I realize that I'm not getting the answer I hoped for in that direction. So it strikes me that the model may be what's wrong. Maybe you can't find it in that direction because that's not where the answer lies. Maybe consciousness is something entirely other than, say, an atom or even an electron. All the little Lego blocks that make up perceivable reality. What is consciousness? We don't know. So it gives the appearance that consciousness is a function of the human mind. And there's a sense in which that's true. But I don't think it's true that the brain creates consciousness. I'm going to model this in a very different way, and I can't offer proof of this. I can only tell you that it gives you a theoretical model, a mythical model even, if you want to think about it in those terms, that provides a more satisfactory answer than constantly trying to fit the idea of consciousness into a materialistic paradigm. Think of it like this. If you're up in the sky, this is just an analogy, if you're up in the sky looking down from, say, a helicopter, and you're traveling over the sea, and there's a group of small islands below you, well, you could say there are 5 islands, each one separate from the others. But if the sea wasn't there, you wouldn't see the islands. You would just see a single landmass that was uneven, having peaks and troughs. Okay? So the whole thing is one. But if you put the water in, it looks as if there are several things. Okay, so bear that analogy in mind. It's very easy to get all mixed up at this level of thinking, but this analogy to me provides a far better explanation for what consciousness is. If I mix a little more philosophy into this, such as, I'm a monist or a non-dualist. We are surrounded by a universe of apparent duality, one thing separate from another, but we know that's not the case. We know, for instance, that the entire universe came out of a singularity, where everything was one. All this separateness was once one. So there's a sense in which it still is one. It just appears as more than one. So that's kind of like the analogy I was making. We have one appearing as separateness. So the way I see consciousness is, it's not so much that the physical matter of my brain is generating consciousness. It's more that it's funneling it. From where? From this mysterious, fuzzy, non-dual essence that is the ground of being for everything that exists. I see everything here as emerging from a higher dimension of being that is formless and timeless and incomprehensible to the human mind. I believe that because I'm surrounded by a universe of phenomena that requires explanation, and the explanation can't be found in simple cause and effect within space-time. We have no clue how this whole place began. One thing that I think is a pity, I think that, cosmologists like Stephen Hawking, for instance, whose work I really admire, and I'm really not fit to tie his shoelaces in terms of my understanding of physics. But yet at the same time, Stephen Hawking has nothing to say about consciousness. He's a lot to say about the physical universe, but nothing to say about consciousness. And I think there's a general ignorance among physicists that consciousness has any bearing on the universe itself. And I think it really does. Again, it's very hard for me to prove that. But here I am, this marvelous consciousness looking out of these two eyes, total inability to explain what I am, or how a seemingly dead planet can produce living creatures that are conscious. That really is a marvel. And I think there's a general assumption among physicists that life is a bit like a fungus that just happened to sprout. But way, way more than that is going on. I think you haven't yet heard me use the term universal mind. That's the term that Lyrical Orion, who suggested the question, that's the term she used. I have a problem with the term universal mind because it's what you call an anthropomorphism. Big convoluted word, but it's an important word. For instance, when people talk about the idea of God, they do it in anthropomorphic terms, which means you think of God a bit like a man. You talk about the hand of God, the arm of God, the thoughts of God. These are all anthropomorphisms. So I don't think it's a good idea to think about the ground of being as a mind. Because, or at least not as a mind in any kind of human-like sense. Because there's us here now, and we've only been around, the human race has only been around for this tiny fraction of the Earth's existence. And the Earth has only been around for a small fraction of the universe's existence. So we are a very late addition to all this. So that makes me think that whatever the explanation is, whatever the ground of being is, it's not remotely like the human creature. And if we call it consciousness or mind, we have to think of it in very, very primordial terms. Because if we look at the evolutionary history of all life here on this planet, it's very clear that we began as a consciousness that was very, very simple. And gradually, through a process of mutation, adaptation to the environment, replication, we gradually changed into something more complex. And these changes accumulated over time until eventually you have the human being that is here today. So nothing remotely like this existed at the beginning. The primordial thing at the beginning was trying to get to be like this. So the problem with the term universal mind is it creates a kind of a false sense of separateness where we think there is little me down here separate from big me in some higher dimension, and I can somehow talk to the universal mind. No, you are the universal mind. There is no separateness. Just like in the analogy with the islands. The islands appear as separate objects when the sea level is there, but they're not. They're one. Everything here is one. It is the universal mind. You're the universal mind right here, right now. I'm the universal mind right here, right now. The universal mind is not a God that you have to connect to interface with in some way. It's you. There is no separateness. And that's something that clicked with me some time ago, and it is very hard to explain. But I think if you just spend enough time contemplating these issues, it will click with you. So yes, the way I have answered the question, is consciousness a function of the human mind? It appears to be so, because consciousness flows through this organism. I don't think this organism generates it. I think consciousness flows through it and obtains its own complexity through this organism. So when you look at it scientifically, it is going to appear that consciousness is a function of the human mind. But is consciousness an aspect of the universal mind? Yes. More so than that, it is the universal mind. There's no separation whatsoever. Okay, let's see what the others have to say on this. Finally, the question I suggest for the next round on the dark wheel is, are ghosts real? If so, what are they?